Smack, smack! 2 slaps landed across my face in the middle of the lavish wedding I had paid for in full. My glasses flew to the floor, my cheek burned. In front of nearly 200 guests, my future daughter-in-law in a pristine white gown screamed, "Why does an old woman need so much space? Hand over the apartment keys." The ballroom fell silent except for whispers, eyes mixing pity and contempt. My son stood there, head down, unable to say a single word to defend his mother. The humiliation was like salt ground into my heart, but I didn't cry. I pulled out my phone and decisively dialed one number. In under 20 minutes, the person who walked into that ballroom made the boldest one in the room tremble and burst into tears. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Beatrice Monroe, 69 years old, widowed for more than 12 years. Since my husband Harold passed from heart disease, I've lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in the River Point area outside Nashville. My life is simple. I get up at 6 a.m. and make a black coffee, drive my 10-year-old sedan to the little flower shop where I work part-time, then come home to tend the balcony with pots of geraniums and lavender. To my neighbors, I'm friendly Mrs. Monroe who hands out leftover bouquets at the end of the day. To people who know my son Caleb, I'm just an ordinary middle-class widow living on a pension, nothing special. And to Savannah, Caleb's new bride, I'm nothing but an old obstacle standing between them and my by a legal board apartment. I stayed quiet for too long. So on my own son's big night beneath crystal chandeliers, soft jazz, and polite laughter, I was turned into a joke. When Savannah's hand cracked across my cheek a second time, the crystal lights on the ceiling seemed to sway. The crowd's whispers rippled through the ballroom. "Oh my God, at the wedding? What a rude bride. But maybe she's really old and can't hold on to the place." No one, absolutely no one stepped in to stop it or stand up for me. I caught the eye of Savannah's great aunt. She smirked, shook her head with fake pity. Her young friends hid their mouths, giggling like they were watching a staged scene. Worst of all was Caleb, my son, the child I raised for over 30 years. He just stared at the floor, fists clenched, shoulders shaking, but not with anger, with shame. He didn't look at me. He didn't stop Savannah. He chose silence. I remembered the afternoon a year ago when Caleb proposed to Savannah at a fancy rooftop bar. He called me, thrilled, saying he'd found a partner for life. I forced a smile and congratulated him, though from the first time we met, I noticed how Savannah's eyes inspected every corner of my apartment more than they ever looked at my son. But tonight, I had no room left for patience. This humiliation crossed a line. I stood, knees shaking but head high. I didn't rush to fight back. Instead, I bent to pick up each shard of glass, laid them in my palm, and quietly stepped back, pulling my old black purse close. I dialed the number I'd saved as Victor, Plan B. Victor Hale, my longtime financial advisor, the only person besides me who knew I was not poor, not helpless, despite the image I let the world see. In a steady, firm voice, I said only, "Victor, come now. It's time." I hung up, then walked back into the ballroom, scanning the faces buzzing with gossip. I clearly heard someone mutter, "She should have moved to a nursing home ages ago." Another said, "Savannah isn't wrong. Old people don't need that much space." Each word was salt on an open wound. But a fire rose in me. I'd played poor for years to protect my privacy and to make sure my son grew up humble, not leaning on wealth. I believed modesty would keep the family safe. I was wrong. My silence fed other people's greed. Savannah smugly smoothed her white gown. The lights bounced off the crystals in her hair. "That's the price of being selfish," she announced, loud enough for the whole room. "From now on, Caleb and I will live in that apartment. An old woman doesn't need that much space." Blood roared in my ears, but my hands were steady. I knew that in just 20 minutes, her arrogance would collapse. I didn't need to shout or argue. I had the truth, and truth is harsher than any slap. I looked at my son one last time. Caleb stood frozen, eyes fixed on the polished wood floor. I tried to find even a flicker of the little boy who once held my hand in Central Park at 6 years old, promising, "I'll always protect you, Mom." But no, the man before me was not that child anymore. I turned and walked into the hallway, where the light was softer and the music faded. I leaned against the wall, gently touched my burning cheek. In the mirror, I saw an older woman with silver hair, a face lined by years, eyes wet yet resolute. I whispered to myself, "Enough, Beatrice. They picked the wrong woman to humiliate." While the ballroom kept humming with wedding music, I stood still and waited. In under 20 minutes, Victor would arrive, and then Savannah would learn the cost of greed. I took a long breath, feeling a strange calm. I knew I was about to lose something precious, the image of a mother who always forgives her son. But in exchange, I would reclaim something more important, my dignity. For years, I lived a life people assumed was poor. Every morning, I woke at 6 a.m., brewed a black coffee in a worn machine, and got ready for work. I worked part-time at a small shop on Maple Street, where the scent of roses and lavender mixed with the damp of plastic buckets. I loved it, arranging flowers, chatting briefly with customers, then driving my 10-year-old sedan back to a 2-bedroom apartment by the river. From the outside, it was just a plain widow's routine. No husband, no luxury, nothing to show off. I rotated a few faded cardigans, bought clothes on end-of-season clearance. My furniture was simple, some pieces so old the paint peeled. To Savannah, all of it confirmed one thing: I was barely scraping by on a pension. But the truth was something else entirely. The only person who ever truly knew me besides me was Harold, my husband. He wasn't loud or flashy. He worked in local finance, ordinary on paper, but he had rare foresight and patience. For years, we quietly saved and invested. Every dollar had a plan. A plot outside the city, an older office building in a prime spot, municipal bonds with steady interest. Together they became a quiet empire. We never showed off. Harold used to say, "Beatrice, flaunted wealth is like hanging meat on the door for thieves. If we live simply, people will see a little bird not worth the trouble." I believed him. Honestly, I felt lighter living that way. No competition, no show, just peace. When Harold died, I kept the same cover. I didn't tell Caleb what his father left me. I showed him a pension, some savings, and this apartment. I thought it was the right choice to teach him the value of work, of earning an honest living. I didn't want him to lean on inheritance and forget how to stand on his own, but that modest cover slowly turned me into a target for contempt. I remember clearly the first time Savannah visited. It was a rainy fall day in Nashville. Caleb brought her to meet me. I opened the door with a smile, wearing a gray cardigan and worn slacks. I poured chamomile tea and sat them on my slightly frayed fabric sofa. Savannah scanned the small kitchen, eyes landing on the yellowed electric oven. The corners of her eyes tightened, her mouth tilted. In a sugary voice edged with bite, she asked, "Are you managing? In a place this small?" It sounded like concern, but each word was a splash of cold water. I smiled and said simply, "I'm fine," then set the teacup down. Caleb gave a stiff smile and said nothing. But after that day, I noticed he started borrowing her tone. On our weekly calls, Caleb asked, "Have you thought about moving? A 2-bedroom is kind of a waste for someone your age." He sounded casual, but I heard Savannah's script word for word. I didn't snap back. I kept my routine: shop in the morning, plants in the afternoon, weekends with books or the farmer's market. To the neighbors, I was Mrs. Monroe, with a ready smile and spare bouquets. To co-workers, the steady older lady who didn't complain. And to Caleb and Savannah, I was a frugal old widow with nothing but the River Point apartment. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been wrong to hide the truth. Maybe I played poor so well that people believed I had nothing left but a roof. But then Harold's words echoed, "Simplicity is armor. If he were alive, he would have chosen the same." The problem was, Savannah didn't see me as a person. In her eyes, I was an old woman on a pension clinging to a wasteful two-bedroom, and Caleb, instead of pushing back, gradually absorbed that view as normal. One late evening, I sat in my small kitchen under warm yellow light, the paint on the walls a little faded. I thought about the modest mask I'd worn for decades. It once protected me, preserved our peace. Now Savannah used it as an excuse to belittle me, and Caleb was forgetting the truth behind it. I poured more tea, took a small sip, and told myself, let them think that. Sometimes the best way to see who people are is to let them believe you're weak. Time passed, and the simple cover I carefully built became the door Savannah used to launch a relentless campaign. She stopped with the hints and went straight for open pressure. One spring afternoon, Caleb and Savannah dropped by after work. While I washed dishes, Savannah pulled glossy brochures from her bag and spread them across the table. Each page showed all-inclusive senior communities, sparkling pools, candlelit dining rooms, nurses on duty 24/7. Her voice was sweet. "Beatrice, have you thought about a place like this? Full care, friends your age, activities. You wouldn't have to worry about the house or repairs." I dried my hands, looked at the shiny pictures, and asked, "What about my apartment?" Savannah shrugged. "Sell it, of course. The money would let you live comfortably for years." Her tone was airy, but her eyes flashed. My apartment was nothing but a listing to be flipped. I smiled, folded the pages, and handed them back. "I haven't considered it," I said. Inside, a warning bell rang. After that, she didn't bother to hide it. Every visit meant new brochures, highlighted lines about premium services and lifetime medical guarantees. This wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was a system of pressure. Caleb first laughed it off as just ideas, but slowly he repeated the same line. "Mom, someday you'll need 24/7 care. Why not plan now?" One evening, while Caleb was in the bathroom, I heard Savannah in the kitchen. She lowered her voice, but I caught every word. "Yeah, Mom, the Riverview balcony will get a great price. If we play it right, the sale will cover us for a few years. Don't worry, I've got it. She doesn't really have a choice." I froze, fists tight, heart pounding. They were talking as if my apartment already belonged to them, not just Savannah, her family too. In their heads, I wasn't an independent person, just a signature on a deed. When Caleb came out, I pretended to rearrange cups. He smiled. "Want dessert, Mom?" I shook my head. A last small piece of my faith in my son's innocence began to crumble. From that day, I knew I couldn't sit still. I needed the truth. I needed to know exactly how deep Caleb and Savannah were, in that they clung to my home like a lifeline. I thought of Nora Delgado, an old high school friend who now works in real estate. Nora once told me, "Anyone in Nashville buying or selling a house without it passing through me must be from another planet." I believed her. One morning I called, "Nora, I need a favor. I want you to check Caleb and Savannah's finances. My apartment seems to be part of their plan." There was a few seconds of silence, then Nora said, serious now, "Are you sure, B?" "This won't be easy to hear." "I'm sure," I answered, my voice shaky but firm. 3 days later, Nora met me at a quiet cafe. She set a thick file on the table. White pages packed with text, a few marked in yellow. Nora looked at me, a mix of regret and anger in her eyes. "B, brace yourself. Caleb and Savannah are drowning in debt. They're almost 3 months behind on rent at their current place. Their revolving credit card and consumer loan balances total over $110,000. Both cars are financed, and the wedding contract they just signed pushed costs up to nearly $60,000. They're underwater. I gripped the papers, my heart sinking. Nora went on. There's more last week. A neighbor told me they saw Savannah with a man carrying measuring tools, standing below your building and pointing at the Riverview balcony. He was clearly an appraiser. My face burned. While I thought I still had a shred of privacy, they were quietly turning my apartment into a commodity to be priced out. Nora touched my hand lightly. Listen, to them this apartment is a lifeline. If they sell it, they can pay off debt, get seed money to start over, have something to cling to. The problem is, it's not their apartment. It's yours. And they're planning as if you no longer have a say. I closed the file and took a deep breath. Pain stabbed through me, followed by a cold wave. I used to think Savannah was just controlling, and Caleb was merely influenced, but what Nora laid out blew up every illusion. This wasn't simple disrespect, it was a calculated scheme. That night I sat in the living room and spread out Nora's documents. The debt figures danced in front of me, $110,000 in credit card balances. $58,000 in wedding costs still unpaid, 3 months of overdue rent. I thought of all the times Savannah acted worried about my health, all the syrupy talk about a better care facility. So it all had a purpose. I looked around my apartment. The little kitchen, the windows facing the river, the armchair where Harold used to read the paper. These aren't just assets to price. This is memory, my life. And now, they were quietly plotting to erase it all for a shot at clearing debt. The pain of realizing my own son had turned me into a financial instrument is something no mother wants to admit. But I couldn't dodge it anymore. I'd seen the signs, heard them with my own ears, held the proof in my hands. To Caleb and Savannah, I was an obstacle, and this apartment was the prize they'd take at any cost. I slid the file into my desk drawer. In the mirror, I saw my face, eyes bloodshot but steely. I whispered to myself, they think they've found a lifeline. They won't expect that lifeline to pull them under. After Nora's file, nothing Savannah did looked harmless anymore. Every snide comment, every tight smile, each was a puzzle piece in a plan drawn up long ago. And she didn't hesitate to speed it up. One morning, Savannah dropped by the flower shop where I work. I was arranging white lilies when I heard her heels striking the wood floor. Arms crossed, she eyed me up and down and snapped, "That cardigan, what decade is that from, Mom? It looks so dated. People will think no one cares about you." I kept placing stems in the vase and gave a thin smile. I wear what's comfortable, that's all. Inside, each word jabbed at my dignity. She didn't stop. Her eyes flicked to the street, landing on my old sedan parked on the corner. "That car. It's actually dangerous, Mom. One hard break and the wheel might fly off. Why won't you just replace it?" I answered evenly. "It runs fine." "I keep up with maintenance," Savannah scoffed, voice low but clear. "Old people are so stubborn, always making life harder for themselves." Those lines weren't just insults. They were arrows aimed straight at my pride, a woman who has lived independently all her life. She went after my work, too. Another evening at dinner with Caleb, she smirked when I mentioned a longtime customer buying flowers. "Really, Mom? You're happy standing on your feet for hours, hauling buckets, trimming stems, just to bring home a few bucks? People your age are supposed to enjoy retirement, not wear themselves out." Caleb stayed silent, head down, just eating. I looked at my son, waiting for him to say one word in my defense, but all he did was nod along. I saw in his eyes a quiet agreement with Savannah. And I understood. She was turning those jabs into common sense in his mind. The breaking point was a family meeting at her parents' house. The invite was polite. "Come for dinner, there are a few things to discuss." I didn't refuse. I wanted to see their next move. The dining room blazed under a chandelier, a long table set with too many dishes. I sat across from Caleb and Savannah, with her parents on either side. On the surface, it felt like a warm family meal. In truth, it was a silent courtroom, and I was the defendant. Before the main course, Savannah slid a thick packet in front of me. She smiled politely, voice sweet and cold. "Mom, we and my parents have prepared a plan for your future. At your age, you need the best care. This is a contract for a premium care facility. If you sell the River Point apartment, the proceeds will cover long-term fees. And whatever's left, of course it'll help us start out more securely." The room went silent, waiting for my reaction. I looked at the Pren's packet and saw numbers and charts calculated to the penny, everything prepared as if my voice didn't matter. I raised my head and asked slowly, "What if I don't agree?" Savannah smiled, eyes triumphant. She didn't say it, but her father, a stern-looking man, spoke up. "Mrs. Beatrice, sometimes older people are too emotional to make sound decisions. In those cases, the family is well within its rights to request a competency evaluation. If the results show you're no longer capable, the court will appoint a guardian." I heard every word. Competency evaluation, the sword hanging over every older adult's head, ready to strip away autonomy with a few pages and signatures. I looked at Caleb. He sat there, avoiding my eyes, nodding occasionally to match Savannah and her parents. No pushback, no protection. The boy who hugged me tight after a bike crash at 8 years old now sat and watched people debate shipping his mother off to a facility. In that moment, I felt a line had been crossed. This wasn't sniping or indirect pressure anymore. It was an open, blatant plan, her whole family involved, and Caleb complicit in silence. They wanted more than my apartment. They wanted my dignity, my autonomy, my independence guarded for nearly 7 decades. I placed my hand lightly on the packet, pushed it back toward Savannah, and stood up. My voice was calm and hard as steel. "Thank you for your concern, but I am fully capable of deciding my own life." Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked out of that bright, spotless room. Driving my sedan home, my eyes stung, but my hands were steady on the wheel. I knew the fight had officially begun. That night, I sat in my living room under warm light. I picked up my phone and found Victor Hale, financial advisor, Harold's loyal friend, and the one person I still trust. When Victor's voice came through, I said only, "Victor, it's time. Set up the contingency plan." He paused for a few 2 seconds, then answered firmly, "Beatrice, I understand. We'll start immediately." I set the phone down and exhaled. A strange calm rose in me. For the first time in years, I was no longer just a mother being patient. I was a woman ready to fight for her dignity. That call with Victor felt like flipping on a light in a dark room. I sat quietly for hours after we hung up, listening to the clock tick, thinking about what he'd promised, to pull every guarantee, every transfer I'd signed, every piece of paper I'd rushed to sign out of love for my son. 2 days later, I went to Victor's office on the 11th floor of a glass building, modern, quiet. The door opened to the familiar scent of oak. Victor was waiting, a thick file tied with cord in his hands. He set it down and looked me in the eye. "Beatrice, I've compiled everything. You should brace yourself." I nodded. He untied the cord and turned the pages. The numbers read like an indictment. Caleb has steady income enough for a young family to live comfortably. But Savannah has pulled him into what I call a borrowed gloss lifestyle, credit cards revolving, spending beyond their means, car loans, furniture on credit. And here, Victor flipped a few pages and pointed to a bold line. The wedding. Total costs over $55,000. My eyes grew heavy. He continued, "More than half of that was deposited with a third-party guarantee. The third party is you, Beatrice. I signed on your behalf because Savannah wanted Riverton Grand, and they required a guarantor with assets." I froze. I remembered the afternoon Caleb begged me to sign, saying it was just a small convenience. I believed him. Helping my son on his big day seemed obvious. I didn't realize I'd slid my neck into the noose. Victor spoke slowly. There's more. In the last 18 months, you quietly covered multiple late fees for Caleb. Here's the summary. He slid over a detailed table. Credit, cards, rent, insurance, even small medical bills. The final number on the last line, $122,430. I laid my palm on the paper. It came away damp with sweat. $122,000 money I'd drawn from contingencies and small investments to help Caleb one last time. But one last time turned into another and another. I sat still, hearing my heartbeat in my chest. What I thought was love had become complicity. I'd turned myself into the life raft for my son and daughter-in-law to cling to while I sank into their lies. Victor closed the file and looked at me, steady. Beatrice, you can keep doing this quietly, carrying the load until they take your apartment, or you can pull the safety net right now. I looked up, my voice low and certain. Are you asking if I'm ready? Victor nodded. I'm ready, I said. In that moment, I knew I'd crossed a line. I wasn't the compliant mother anymore. I was a woman who had to protect herself. Victor opened his laptop and began drafting suspension orders. Every recurring transfer to Caleb rent, the $4,000 a month stipend, even active guarantees, was set to stop the moment I signed. He also revised my will per my new plan. Instead of leaving assets directly to Caleb, everything would move into an independent trust overseen by a legal board. I quietly watched the words appear on the screen, feeling like tiny needles were being pulled out of my skin. It hurt, but it was a relief. When the paperwork was nearly finished, Victor asked, "Do you want them to know about this right away?" I shook my head. No. They still think I'm an easy-to-dupe old woman. Let them. I want everything to explode at the exact moment. Victor smiled, understanding. Then the wedding, right in front of everyone. I nodded. The thought made me shiver, but it also lit a fire in me. That night, when I got home, I opened the wooden cabinet and took out an old brown box. Inside were papers Harold left behind, keepsakes I thought I'd never use. I sorted them and stacked them neatly into a thick file with a dark brown cover. I named it the Chestnut File. It sounded gentle, but inside was enough power to turn a fateful night on its head. In that file, I put brokerage statements for a bond portfolio, certificates showing ownership of an office building, a lease contract for a house by the lake, and the receipts proving I'd been paying Caleb's bills for months. Every sheet was evidence, every number an accusation. I knew I couldn't carry it all into the ballroom alone, so I texted Mrs. Whitaker, the neighbor who lives one floor below me, a widow like me, but strong and careful. We've been close for 10 years. I trust her. My message was short. When I signal you, please bring the Chestnut File to Riverton Grand. Thank you. A few minutes later, she replied, B, don't worry. I'll be there. That night, I sat on the balcony and listened to the Tennessee River lap softly against the bank. Moonlight stretched across the water like a silver ribbon. I thought of Harold. He used to say, when you're pushed into a corner, that's when you learn how strong you really are. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. It was time to be strong. The wedding day was drawing near. Savannah probably believed she'd slap me and snatch the apartment. Caleb probably thought his mother would keep enduring it. But only Victor and I, and now Mrs. Whitaker, knew. A storm was waiting for them on their happiest day. I gripped the file and felt its weight. It wasn't just paperwork. It was the truth, and truth always speaks louder than any lie. The first sound I heard after those slaps wasn't the gentle music in the ballroom. It was the roar of whispers rising like waves. My broken glasses skittered across the dance floor, reflecting the chandelier's harsh light, as if my anniversaire dignity had just been ground underfoot in front of nearly 200 guests. I stood there for a few seconds, my face burning, my heart pounding. But instead of crying or running away, I tightened my grip on my purse, took a long breath, and walked straight out. The hallway at the Riverdin Grand was carpeted in red, the lighting dimmer, quieter space for me to catch my breath. I sent Victor a short text. "It's time." A few minutes later, I saw him at the ballroom door, adjusting his tie, a heavy black briefcase in hand. In that case were things Caleb and Savannah would never have imagined. Victor and I walked back into the ballroom. The music stopped. 180 pairs of eyes snapped toward us. The smug mood born from those slaps froze solid. I saw a few guests raise their phones to record, like they knew a new scene was about to start. Victor stepped to the mic, his voice clear and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Victor Hale, financial advisor to Mrs. Beatrice Monroe. I am here to announce that, as of right now, all guarantees for tonight's wedding event have been canceled." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. The venue manager frowned and strode toward Victor. He continued firm. "Furthermore, the $4,000 per month support Mrs. Monroe has been transferring to Caleb and his wife for the last 2 years is officially suspended. The rental guarantee Mrs. Monroe previously signed will also be canceled immediately." Savannah sprang up, eyes blazing red, and screamed at me. "She's dirt poor. Don't believe her. It's all a scam." Her voice ricocheted around the opulent hall, shriller than the music ever was. Some guests gaped, others leaned in to whisper. I walked slowly to the podium, opened my purse, and pulled out the chestnut file. The rustle of paper filled the silent room. I laid out each stack: bond portfolio statements, proof of ownership for an income-generating office building, the deed to a Glunit 5 lakefront house. "This is the truth," I said, not loudly but every word sharp. "I'm not poor. I chose to live simply. Simplicity doesn't mean I have nothing," people murmured. Several phones rose to capture the moment. Flashes popped like 100 witnesses blinking. Caleb stumbled a step forward, face drained, voice cracking. "Mom, you paid for all of this? This wedding, and all the other stuff? It was you?" I looked at my son. His eyes were wet, like a child caught red-handed. My heart clenched, but I wouldn't let softness drag me down. I answered, short and cutting, "You forgot respect, so I had to remember it for you." The room went dead quiet. Somewhere, a woman sobbed, maybe moved, maybe furious. Savannah trembled, but she wasn't ready to back down. She jabbed a finger at me. "You're making it up, fake documents. You're just putting on a show to humiliate us." Victor immediately raised a sealed envelope. "These are certified copies from a city law office. Every document is legal. If anyone doubts it, you can verify right now." The venue manager nodded and took the file from Victor. He skimmed the pages, eyes widening, then turned to Savannah and Caleb. "If this is accurate, you owe the balance for tonight's event immediately. Without a guarantor, we'll have to stop service." The room erupted in chatter. Savannah's face went chalk white, sweat streaked her makeup. Caleb stood frozen, lips shaking, unsure where to turn. I stood tall and swept my gaze over the 180 guests. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances from both families. Now their looks toward Savannah weren't admiration but contempt mixed with pity. An older guest whispered, loud enough for the row to hear, "My God, all these years she kept quiet, and she's the one who paid for everything." I inhaled and gathered the papers back into the file. My arms didn't tremble. I knew I'd just reclaimed the most precious thing: my dignity. Savannah, by contrast, was crumbling. Her whole body shook. "No, no way. You're just a weak old lady. There's no way you have all this." I met her eyes and spoke slowly, like delivering a final verdict. "Savannah, weakness is what you wanted me to believe. The truth is, I tolerated too much. You mistook patience for having nothing to lose." Applause started at the back. 1, then 2, then a cluster of guests clapping in unison. Not a wedding cheer, a clap for the truth laid bare. Caleb hung his head, shoulders shaking. Maybe for the first time he grasped what he and his wife had done, but for me, that realization came too late. I turned and stepped down. Behind me, chaos. The manager conferring with staff, Savannah wailing, Caleb reaching for her hand and getting shoved away. And me, I walked with steadier legs than I'd had in years. That night the masks fell, not just Savannah's, not just Caleb's, mine too. The frail old woman they imagined was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth and was ready for the next round. The air in Riverton Grand congealed after I exposed the truth. Whispers swelled, phones were up everywhere recording. I knew, with every second, the glittering room had turned into a public courtroom. And Victor, calm as ever, was ready to read the charges. He opened a second file and pulled out a neatly clipped stack. His voice rang through the mic. To make this clear, I will present the detailed amounts Mrs. Beatrice Monroe has provided to Caleb and his wife over the last 36 months. These are not opinions. They are documents stamped by banks and a law office. The room went still. Savannah shook, gripping the table edge, lipstick smearing into streaks on her pale face. Victor read slowly, each number slicing the air. Apartment rent, 8 months delinquent, totaling $26,400, paid by Mrs. Monroe. Revolving credit card, payments, $54,000, covered in 18 installments. Health and auto insurance bills, $12,800. Miscellaneous consumer loans, phone, furniture, $9,300, and in particular Riverton Grand wedding deposit, $55,000 guaranteed in Mrs. Monroe's name. Victor lifted his head, voice firm. In total, over 36 months, the support amounts to $157,500 US dollars. The buzz exploded. Some guests covered their mouths, others shook their heads. An older man blurted out, loud enough to carry, "Good Lord, more than $100,000, and they dared to humiliate her?" Savannah nearly collapsed into her chair. Makeup smeared, mascara streaked black down her cheeks. She stammered, "No, this is my wedding day. This can't stop. This is my wedding." Caleb went pale, stepped forward like he might snatch the papers from Victor. But Victor's look stopped him. My son turned to me, voice cracking. "Mom, please don't do this. Not today, not in front of everyone." I stood straight. My heart hurt, but my voice held. "Caleb, consequences are paid now, not with tears. You cry today, but you left me crying for months. Tears won't erase what you and Savannah have done." Savannah lifted her head, desperation in her eyes, but still screamed, "What more do you want?" "You have everything. You're old. You don't need that apartment. Why won't you give us a chance?" I answered simply, like the final blow of a hammer. "You were given chances over and over, and you used them to grind down your mother." Right then, the venue manager, Mr. Pierce, approached, tall, stern. He spoke loud enough for the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, per the contract, all event costs must be backed by a valid guarantor. With the guarantee canceled, we require immediate payment of the remaining balance. If not, we'll have to stop the event here and now." A chilling silence fell. Savannah seemed to lose all strength. Her hands dropped, the chair tipped back. She stammered, lips trembling. "No, this is my wedding day. I prepared. I waited." Caleb turned to me and dropped to his knees at the podium, voice breaking like a child's. "Mom, please. I promise I'll change. I'll treat you better. Please save today." I looked down at my son. My heart ached. But I knew if I faltered now, I'd lose everything. I leaned in and whispered just loud enough for the mic to catch. "Son, love is not an unlimited checkbook. Respect is the foundation. When you forgot that, I had to remember it for you." Victor gave me a slight nod. He opened the last envelope, his voice clear. "This is the announcement of Mrs. Monroe's updated will." All assets, including real estate, bonds, and investment portfolios, will be transferred into the Monroe Shield Fund. This fund is created for one purpose only: to protect older adults from exploitation and financial drain by their own families. The words fell like a funeral bell. I heard guests whisper, "Serves the greedy right." She thought she could slap her mother-in-law and still take the apartment. "A wedding turned into a disaster," Savannah screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the murmurs. Caleb sank into a chair with his face in his hands. The room was no longer a wedding hall. It was a public courtroom where a sentence for greed had just been read. I turned and walked slowly across the red carpet. Behind me, chaos, crying, arguing, guests leaving tables. I didn't look back. I left behind a wedding with no way out. The glass doors of the Riverton Grand closed behind me. Outside, the Nashville night breeze was cool, washing away the stuffy air of the ballroom. I lifted my eyes to the dark sky, heavy yet relieved. I knew from this moment on I was no longer their prey. I had become living proof that dignity cannot be bought with fake tears. 3 days after the ruined wedding, my River Point apartment was no longer peaceful. The phone rang non-stop, shredding what little rest I had. Sometimes it was Caleb first raging, then begging. "Mom, why did you do this? Do you know how ashamed we are? You ruined everything. Please undo it. Give me another chance." I stayed quiet and let his tangled pleas pass. But sometimes his tone turned to spite. "You're selfish. You're old. Why? Hang on to your stuff. If you don't give in, we'll do it another way." After Caleb came Savannah. Her texts poured in, my screen lighting up constantly. "You'll pay for this. I'm going to sue you. I'll prove you're not competent." I read each line, set the phone down, oddly calm. After years of swallowing it, I was used to them seeing me as the obstacle. Bad news came from Kayla, my niece, my late sister's daughter. She called, panicked. "Aunt B, did you know? Caleb and Savannah are spreading it everywhere that you've lost your mind. They're collecting statements from some wedding guests, saying you acted impulsively and couldn't control your emotions. They're saying you shamed the whole family." I sat down, fingers laced tight. I knew this was their plan B. If they couldn't take it by persuasion, they'd try to strip my autonomy through the courts. And that's exactly what happened. A week later, Victor showed me a copy of the filing. Caleb and Savannah's lawyer had officially requested a competency evaluation. In the petition, they argued that impulsive actions at the wedding, abruptly and publicly cutting off financial support, show Mrs. Monroe is losing control and needs medical assessment. I sighed and set the petition on the table. "Impulsive?" I repeated, dry. They forgot the entire event had been recorded from dozens of angles. Right as they tried to use that night against me, something out of their control happened. Videos posted by guests on social media started spreading fast. In the videos, people saw Savannah slap me across the face in the middle of the room, the smack echoing under the chandelier. They saw me calmly pick up my glasses, no crying, just a small smile, then walk out. Then they saw me return with a file in hand, speaking slowly, reasoning clearly, laying out proof. Thousands of comments piled up. "She's calmer than anyone half her age." That slap was shameful. "This daughter-in-law will pay for it." I've never seen someone hold their dignity like that in a moment like this. Public outrage swelled. Caleb and Savannah's claim of impulsiveness only made them look cheaper and more brazen. While the internet boiled, Nora, my old friend, brought more proof. One morning she came to my place and held up her phone. "B, I have photos of Savannah walking a strange man around the River Point building, pointing at your balcony, taking pictures. They're clearly trying to get a quiet appraisal." I looked at the screen and saw Savannah's figure in the late afternoon light, her face tense, papers in hand. The man looked like an appraiser. I nodded, a chill running down my spine. There was more. Mrs. Whitaker, my close neighbor, confirmed she'd seen Savannah lingering at my door several times, like a prowler. Once she caught her pretending to take a walk while staring straight at my lock. Victor gathered everything. The public slaps, the threatening texts, the photos of Savannah snooping, the baseless petition. He organized it into neat files, then looked at me. "Beatrice, what you've endured is no longer a private family dispute. It's a pattern of elder abuse, physical assault, financial manipulation, and a plan to seize assets. We're not just going to defend, we're going to counter." I sat still, listening to the papers rustle as Victor closed the file. In my heart, I knew he was right. What Caleb and Savannah did wasn't just my humiliation, it mirrored what so many older people face at the hands of their own. I nodded slowly. "Victor, this time I don't just want to save myself. I want them to face justice." That night, I sat by the window, Nashville's lights glinting on the Tennessee River. My phone kept buzzing with new messages, but I didn't shake like before. Instead, I felt a different strength rising, the strength of truth. They can claim I've lost my mind, collect fake statements, file petitions, but I have evidence. I have clarity the whole world has seen, and I have loyal allies. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Harold, I chose the right path. They won't get another chance to make me a victim." In the night breeze at the window, I could almost hear him answer, "B, you stood up. Keep going, not just for you, but for everyone like you." Court day came faster than I expected. The night before, I barely slept. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through Victor's file again and again. Every sheet, photo, and statement felt like a blade carving the memory deeper. But at the same time, they were armor, what would protect me in the legal fight Caleb and Savannah were dragging me into. In the morning, Victor drove over. He handed me a hot black coffee. "Stay steady. Today isn't about proving yourself to Caleb or Savannah. It's to the law." The Davidson County Courthouse was busier than I thought. Local media were already there, cameras set up near the entrance. They whispered about the wedding wrecked by the bride's slap, now all over social media. I walked through the heavy wooden doors, the echo in my chest. Across the aisle, Caleb and Savannah sat with their attorney. Savannah wore heavy makeup, but the thick foundation couldn't hide the dark circles. Caleb looked thinner, hair messy, his suit hanging like it belonged to someone else. They avoided my eyes, but when I sat, I felt a hostility from their side. The hearing began. Their lawyer stood clipped and sharp. "Your Honor, we will show that Mrs. Beatrice Monroe, due to advanced age and impulsive conduct, can no longer care for herself. At the wedding, she disrupted the event, shamed the family, and made abnormal financial decisions." He produced a few handwritten statements from select guests, obviously ones they recruited, claiming I acted oddly, shouted, and caused a scene. Hearing the lies, I just pressed my lips together and laced my fingers tight. When it was our turn, my attorney stood. No flowery speech, just a gesture. The screen lit with the first clip, the slap at the wedding. The courtroom went silent. The smack was loud, the image of me stumbling but standing, picking up my glasses, not fighting back. Then the footage of me returning with Victor, calm voice, clear reasoning, evidence laid out in front of hundreds. No chaos. No loss of control. Just a woman humiliated in public who still kept her dignity. My attorney continued, "This is undeniable. Mrs. Monroe was not impulsive. She was calm, clear, and acted based on evidence. He showed Savannah's texts to me, blatant threats. 'You'll pay for this. I'll sue you. I'll prove you've lost your mind.' Then the long record of financial support. Hard numbers showing I covered more than $120,000 for Caleb and Savannah over 18 months. Certified, stamped, airtight. This is not an elderly woman who needs a guardian," my attorney said, voice firm. "This is a mother who was exploited, drained, and ultimately abused emotionally and physically." First witness, Mr. Pierce, Riverton Grand's manager. He stood straight, voice steady. I saw the bride slap Mrs. Monroe twice. I also confirmed the event could only proceed because Mrs. Monroe served as guarantor. When the guarantee was canceled, I demanded immediate payment. What followed is on Caleb and Savannah. Next was Mrs. Whitaker, my neighbor. She detailed catching Savannah lurking at my door, looking like someone staking out a target. She pointed at me, voice tight. "I've lived next to B for 10 years. She's clear-headed, independent, and manages everything. Someone who's lost their mind can't maintain a home, run paperwork, and tend a whole garden like she does." Kayla, my niece, was the last witness. She described hearing Caleb and Savannah boast about pushing me into a care facility to take the apartment. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. "Aunt B hasn't lost her mind. They've lost their humanity." I watched the judge take notes, nodding at times. Finally, he brought down the gavel, his voice carrying, "After reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court finds this is a textbook case of psychological and financial abuse of an older adult. The petition for a competency evaluation is denied. The plaintiffs Caleb and Savannah will pay all legal costs and receive a formal admonishment from the court." The room buzzed. I closed my eyes and let out a long breath. The words, "petition denied," lifted a boulder off my chest. But it didn't end there. Days later, the local paper ran a big headline, "A slap that backfired, bride's true face exposed in Nashville court." The story spread quickly. They detailed Savannah's public humiliation of me, the slap at the wedding, broke down the finances, and called me a symbol of resolve at 69. The fallout hit Caleb and Savannah fast. Caleb's company couldn't keep a mid-level manager publicly named in a scandal for abusing his own mother. Within a week, he lost his job. Savannah, a personal image consultant, saw clients vanish. Contracts were canceled. Her phone went silent. I heard it from Victor. He looked at me, voice gentle. "You see, justice sometimes finds its way in unexpected forms." I didn't feel joy or triumph. I just felt my spine straighten, my steps grow lighter. For years, I'd lived in the shadow of patience and disrespect. Today, walking out of that courthouse, I knew I'd reclaimed what matters most, my dignity. On the courthouse steps, the wind lifted my hair, carrying the fresh scent of early fall. I held my head high and told myself, "Harold, I finally did it." I protected not just our apartment, but my own honor. And for the first time in years, my shoulders felt light, no longer bent under a silent load. After the hearing, I thought I'd want to close it all quietly. But life opened another path. One morning, Victor came to my home with a thick envelope in hand. He set it on my familiar kitchen table, his eyes serious. "Mrs. B, this is an invitation from WCN America. They have a show called Turning Points, hosted by Leslie Grant. You can tell the whole story. I think it's time your truth is public, not just in court, but to everyone." I went still. The idea of appearing on TV, before millions, made me hesitate at first. Who was I? Just a 69-year-old widow, working part-time at a flower shop, living in a modest riverfront apartment. But then I remembered the letters and calls of support after the slap video spread. People said I gave them courage to face the abuse they'd endured too. I nodded. "All right, I'll go." The taping took place in a large studio under bright lights. Leslie Grant, a fair-skinned woman with short silver hair, a warm smile, and sharp eyes, shook my hand firmly. She said, "Aurora, viewers need your story today. Think of this as a gift you're giving to millions who are suffering in silence." When the red light came on, I began. My voice trembled a little, but every word was clear. I spoke about Savannah's early concern, sweet tone, but belittling. "Mrs. B, you shouldn't drive that old car anymore. It's dangerous." Step by step, those words turned into manipulation, pushing me to sell my apartment, move to a care facility. And finally, into open violence, the slap at the wedding, in front of nearly 200 people. I didn't dodge any detail. I talked about the humiliation, about Caleb's eyes cast down, unable to look at me, about the complicit silence of the entire room. But I also told how I stood up, called Victor, and chose to turn the tables. This isn't just my story. I looked straight into the lens. It's the story of thousands, millions of older adults. We're often treated as burdens, seen as walking wallets. But the truth is, we have the right to be respected, to keep our homes, our memories, and our dignity. The studio was silent. Leslie nodded gently, her eyes bright. "Aurora," she said, "your story isn't just a painful memory, it's become a field guide to recognizing family abuse. I believe it will change many lives." When the episode aired, I didn't expect the impact. In just 48 hours, it had more than 3 million views online. My inbox filled with messages from everywhere. An older man in Texas said his son had tried to force him to sell the ranch. An older woman in Oregon wrote that her grandson used care as a cover to drain her savings. They said that when they saw me stand up, they found a little courage for themselves. I read every letter, crying and feeling stronger at the same time. I knew I no longer had the right to fade into silence. I had a responsibility to turn my pain into strength for others. A few months later, I published my first book, The Silent Wall. I chose that title for the modest front. Harold and I built a wall to protect our family. In the book, I recounted the humiliation, the pushback, and the victory. More importantly, I laid out the signs of abuse, when care turns into control, when help becomes a leash, when silence is used as a weapon. I kept none of the royalties. Every penny went to the Monroe Shield Fund, the fund to protect older adults from family abuse that Victor and I launched after the trial. We opened a 24/7 hotline, linking a network of attorneys, social workers, and therapists. In the first year alone, the hotline took more than 2,000 calls. Some came at midnight, the choked sobs of a grandmother thrown out by her son, or the shaky voice of an older man whose grandson had taken his pension card. Each time I read the reports, my heart tightened, but I knew we were doing what had to be done. Strangely, my health improved. I slept deeply after years of insomnia. My blood pressure steadied. The doctor said, "Your body is responding to being free of chronic stress. You're living for yourself now, you look younger." I laughed. I wasn't younger. I'd found a new reason to keep going. I relearned how to cook for myself dishes I used to throw together. I bought fresh produce, simmered southern chicken soup, and added a little heat the way Harold liked. I watered the balcony vines and watched the wisteria fall in purple curtains, smiling without guilt. That smile wasn't to soothe anyone or to pretend things were fine, it was truly for me. Once, Leslie Grant called and asked, "Aurora, do you regret it? Going public, dragging the family into the light, did you ever wish you could take it back?" I answered, "No. My only regret is not doing it sooner." In the days that followed, I accepted invitations to speak at conferences, universities, and community centers. Each time I stood before hundreds and told my story, I saw their eyes change. There was sorrow and anger, but above all, empathy. People understood elder abuse isn't a private tragedy, it's a social problem that needs all of us to speak up. My book sold better than I imagined. The Silent Wall reached the Southern Regional bestseller list within 3 months. But for me, success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the handwritten notes I still receive every week. "Thank you, because of you I had the courage to sue my son and get my house back. Thank you. I no longer feel ashamed that my own family took advantage of me." Every time I read them, I lay a hand over my heart and whisper, "Harold, do you see? We didn't live simply for nothing. That simplicity became our strength." Every night before bed, I look around my apartment, the small kitchen, the old armchair, the 2-seat table, the balcony over the Nashville River. I realized the very place Savannah called too cramped and outdated became the anchor for a big fight, and from there, I rebuilt my life. I'm no longer the older woman humiliated at a wedding. I'm the woman who chose to stand tall, tell the truth, and turn pain into a shield for hundreds, thousands of others, and that to me is the truest victory. I thought that after everything, Caleb would disappear from my life for a while. But only 3 weeks after my book came out, my phone lit up with his name. I'd set a special tone for Caleb, a short, dry buzz with no music. I watched the screen, sighed, and picked up. "Mom," he blurted without a greeting. I really need money." "Just a little, I promise I'll pay it back. Just for now. I still don't have a job, Savannah." I cut in. "Caleb, you called because you need money, not to apologize. Right?" Silence for a few seconds. Then he stammered, dodging. "Mom, don't make this hard. I know you have it. You don't need that much." It felt like a knife twisting. All those years I taught him that respect comes before money. And now, the only thing he remembers about his mother is money. The second call came a month later. Same tone, same argument that I don't need much, that he just wants a small loan. I listened without interrupting and answered, "Caleb, money is not the bridge between us. If you're not ready to say something else, stop calling." I hung up. The third time he came to my door, I opened it and found him there, wrinkled. Clothes, uneasy eyes. I looked at my son, whom I once held as a newborn, now standing awkwardly like a stranger. He didn't hug me, didn't ask how I was. He opened with, "Mom, I have no other option. Help me this one time." I stood still, one hand on the doorframe, realizing 3 contacts, all about money. Not one real apology. Not one repentant look. Before I could answer, Savannah pushed in, her voice high. "You have to think of the baby. I'm pregnant. That child needs a home and a good start. Are you going to make your own grandchild suffer?" I went cold. News of her pregnancy should have been joy, but hearing her, I felt a new lever of pressure. They wanted to turn the baby into a shield, a tool to keep extracting. I met her eyes and said slowly, "The baby isn't at fault. But he's not a reason for me to hand everything to parents who don't understand respect or responsibility." That night I tossed and turned. I still remembered Caleb as the carefree boy running through the park with a torn kite, laughing when it rose a few feet. I remembered the nights he had a fever and I stayed up with a cool cloth on his forehead. How can a mother cut off those memories? But memory can't hide reality. The Caleb of today isn't that boy. He chose greed and selfishness. I spoke with Victor. He listened and said, "You can love your grandchild without letting your son exploit you. There are legal tools to protect that." And so, the trust for my future grandchild was born. I opened a special account, overseen by Victor. Funds could be released only when the child turned 18. Nothing for Caleb and Savannah. I decided I would not let them spend in the name of "for the child." When he found out, Caleb called, bitter, "You might as well cut me off." "You trust a lawyer more than your own son," I answered, firm. "Son, motherhood doesn't exempt you from responsibility. Respect is the condition for love, not a prize you get no matter what." "You forgot that." After that, Caleb stopped showing up at my door. Savannah sometimes sent emails blaming, pleading, or complaining about how tired she was being pregnant. I skimmed and quietly deleted them. Meanwhile, my new life filled in differently. I wasn't just a mother freed from family chains, I became an advisor on many cases. A 73-year-old woman came to me, hands shaking over a stack of papers. The title to her home had been pawned by her son without her knowledge. Victor and I walked her through each step from filing a complaint to finding an attorney. When she got her deed back and collapsed in my arms sobbing, I felt something in me ease. A 70-year-old man had been tricked by his grandson into signing a fake financial power of attorney, nearly losing his pension. I connected him with the Monroe Shield pro bono team. The day he squeezed my hand and said, "You saved my life." I shook my head. You saved yourself when you spoke up. The more people I helped, the clearer it was. Stories like mine aren't rare. They hide in outwardly peaceful homes, in fake smiles at family tables, and the cruelest part is it comes from those we trust the most. I wrote more pieces, joined panels on protecting older adults. Every time I stood at the podium, I repeated, "Family is precious, but it can't be an excuse for exploitation or abuse. Love doesn't mean closing your eyes. And respect must always come first." Sometimes, after a long day, I sit alone on the balcony and look down at the river glittering with lights. I think about Caleb. I wonder if there's still a trace of that little boy in his heart. I still hope that someday he'll call me not for money, not for advantage, just to say, "Mom, I'm sorry." But until that day comes, or maybe it never will, I'll keep walking the path I chose. A straight-backed path, not bending, to protect not only myself but other older adults too, because I understand, better than ever, family can bring happiness, but it can also become a shackle. Only when we set respect as the condition does, love truly deserve to exist. 2 years have passed since the day I stood in court, held the file high, and reclaimed my dignity. That's not a short time, but I feel it turned me into someone else. The woman who was slapped in front of a crowd, who once sat alone with humiliation and silence, now stands in a completely different place. The Monroe Shield Fund that I founded with Victor grew faster than anyone expected. We started with just a hotline and a few volunteer attorneys, and now we've opened a 3rd regional center. Each center is a safe place where older adults can call anytime they feel threatened, where they no longer have to suffer in silence. We've helped more than 400 cases in 2 years. Some grandmothers took back homes. Their sons tried to force them to sell. Some grandfathers regained control of their retirement accounts. People who once thought they had to give up now stand up in court. I've taken part in many hearings, meeting lined faces with bright eyes as they learn they're not alone. One fall day, I stood at the Tennessee State hearing podium. In front of me were dozens of legislators. Behind me, reporters, cameras, and concerned citizens. I told my story not to seek pity, but to push for change. I proposed stronger penalties for exploiting older adults and tighter oversight of legal guardianship. When I said, "We need a society where parents don't have to fear their own children," the room went still, then broke into long applause. I knew I was on the right path. That night, I went back to my familiar apartment. I brewed a cup of mint tea and sat on the balcony, looking down at the Tennessee River, black and glittering with lights. It was the very view Savannah once obsessed over, whispering to her mother about pricing the river-facing balcony. I smiled. What they craved were just numbers. What I kept is priceless. Freedom. I traced my steps, pretending to be a poor widow, being humiliated, then standing up to fight. I remembered Caleb 3 times he reached out, not once to apologize. I remembered Savannah eyes sharp as knives, then smearing into streaks of makeup at the wedding. I don't hate them anymore. I've simply left them behind, like a sad chapter closed. My phone buzzed. A new email appeared. An unknown account, no name, just one line. "Mom, I'm sorry." I stared at the screen, my heart tightening. I don't know if it was really Caleb. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I do know I won't go back. I choose to keep walking, with dignity as my guiding light. I shut the laptop and sat quietly. A cool breeze rose from the river, carrying the damp scent of autumn leaves. Inside me echoed an answer I've forged over 2 years. The future isn't about returning to where we were. It's about moving forward with what we've learned. And I, Beatrice Monroe, will keep going. No bowing my head, no regret. I left the balcony, closed the glass door, and felt at peace. I know I chose the right road, dignity instead of silence, the future instead of being imprisoned by the past. Thank you for staying with me to the end of this story. I truly value every minute you spent listening to the journey of a mother, a woman, and a person reclaiming respect. May I ask, what city are you watching from? Please share in the comments. I'd love to know. If you connected with this story, please like, subscribe, and stay for the next videos. Every bit of engagement from you helps us keep spreading the message of protecting older adults and preserving dignity in every family. I'm deeply grateful to you.